Hey folks, Josh Scanlon again with the Heritage Wealth Planning YouTube channel. Today we're going to talk about how to acquire reliable transportation without breaking the bank. And this chapter 6 in my book, Strategic Money Planning, 8 Ways to Get Your Financial House in Order. And this is really comes down to, should you lease a vehicle or should you get a loan for a vehicle? Lease versus loan. Now ideally, if you look at chapter 1 of my book and chapter 2 and whatnot, we don't want you to have any debt. In fact, the very first chapter of this book is Debt is the Enemy. And I'll put a link to that up there. You can see the first video we've done on this to introduce the book to you. But very, very few people have the ability to pay cash money for a vehicle that has low mileage and maybe a newer vehicle as opposed to a beater from 1996. So the facts are most people in the United States today are going to either lease or they're going to buy. And now again, when I buy, it's not buying outright. I mean taking a loan. But let me just share with you my story about when we considered leasing for the first time. And that was in 2008 or maybe 2009. So we had just moved to Texas, South Texas, San Antonio as a matter of fact. The market in 2007 was just taking a decline like you wouldn't believe. I was a fee-based financial advisor, which meant I was paid on the assets I managed for clients. As I said before, as my assets declined by 50%, well, my income declined by 50% as well, but my debt did not. So my debt stayed here, my income declined, and not a good place to be, that's for sure. So we started looking for a job that would pay a good salary with good payments and also was on with steady income. Well, lo and behold, I found one in South Texas. And they moved me down there. It's a good job, good benefits, good pay, steady pay and all that. So we get to Texas, and it was pretty cool. But after about 3 weeks or so, we had to get a new vehicle. My wife had taken the kids. Remember, we had 4 little kids at that point. She had taken them to a mall in South San Antonio, a rather tough part of town. We'd only been there like 2 or 3 weeks. And when she came out of the mall, the car wouldn't turn over. All right, the engine didn't turn over. So thankfully, it was just a battery, dead battery. It was an old battery from a long time ago. And in the South Texas heat, 104 degrees, an old battery is going to have a hard time maintaining itself for very long. So that battery just went kaput. But it was still made me concerned because we had an old Dodge Caravan minivan, I think well over 100,000 miles on it. And she's, trucking 4 little kids through Texas, a part of Texas we weren't that familiar with. So it seemed time to get a new vehicle, just if nothing else for safety precautions. We do not want her breaking down at an inopportune time with my kids in gear. That's not good. So we started looking around. I've always been against leases up to that point. I always thought leases was a way to just shovel good money after bad. You never own equity, blah blah blah. And so I said, well, let's go shop around. And we started looking for a mid, I guess about in 2005, 2006 back then. So a 3 to 4 year old minivan, say 25 to 35,000 miles on it. And to my chagrin, those puppies were still costing 20 to 25,000 bucks. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. 20 to 25,000 bucks for a used vehicle that already has 20 to 30,000 miles on it, that's not good. So I started running some numbers. And one thing you have to know about used vehicles, folks, is that banks typically don't give you extended terms for used vehicles. They'll give you, say, 36 months to 42 months, 3 years to 3.5 years. And so if you calculate an amortization table on a 3 to 3.5 year loan on 25,000 bucks, you're looking at $600 a month. And even though we were in a better place now in our job in South Texas, we didn't have $600 a month of disposable income to put towards a vehicle. Just didn't have it. And so I was like, what are we going to do? We have this older minivan, and it still runs. My concern, though, is that what if it does not continue to run because it did have high miles? So I started looking at other vehicles, and we were right back to where we were. We could have bought a used vehicle, say 8, 9 years old with 100,000 miles on it for 10 to 15,000 bucks. But I was like, well, that's already what we have, and we have this one paid off. So I was like, our options are either we bite the bullet and we keep the vehicle we have, or we just pray that it doesn't break down, and hopefully I get something happens where we make more money, where we can afford that $600 a month payment. Well, my wife saw an ad on the TV that talked about leasing a Honda Odyssey for like $250 a month or something like that. And my first reaction was like, no, leasing's bad. Stay away, stay away. But after giving it some thought, we went down to the dealership, and lo and behold, I was actually quite amazed at the vehicle we could get, a brand spanking new vehicle with high mileage in this case, $15,000 miles a year. And after 3 years, we turn it back in with a residual like $15,000 or something like that. And all that simply means is after your lease is done, you give the car back. And you don't owe anything on it. Now if you have dings and dents, and if you haven't done the maintenance and all that, you're going to owe them some money for maintenance charges. But essentially, if you just maintain your vehicle at their service shop, and that's the one kicker, that's where they make money on, is their service shop. But if you maintain it at their service shop, you don't run into a moose or something like that. At the end of the day, you turn the vehicle back in, and then you can either get another one, or if you want, you can finance it outright, or in this case, pay cash. And so I was hoping that we'd lease it and then just buy it outright for $15,000 at the end of the 3-year lease, which is actually what we ended up doing. So $250 a month. I said, well, that's really all we can afford, so let's do it. And we got a brand spanking new vehicle for $250 a month. After 3 years, we paid cash money for it. The interesting thing was the residual value. You know exactly what you're going to owe going in. It's actually pretty interesting. And so on these Honda Odysseys, actually, it's going to cost you $15,000 after your lease term to buy it outright from Honda. But what is the value you could get for it? Could you then turn around and sell it for $18,000? And the answer is, in this case, yeah, because Hondas keep their value pretty nicely. But I like the vehicle, so we just bought it outright. But we could have turned around, took the $15,000, paid off Honda, and then sold it for $18,000 and had pocketed $3,000 cash. I didn't want to do all that. It's a hassle. So we just kept the vehicle. But that's the thing about a lease, which is nice, is that at the end of the 3-year term, if you have a lease and the residual value is $10,000, but the car is only going for $8,000 on the street, well, it'd be stupid to buy that car outright because it's worth less than what you owe. That's upside down. No reason to do that. You have what's called a put option investments where you can put the vehicle back to the dealer and then go redo it again. It's something else if you want. So again, that's what's kind of cool about a lease. If you owe more than it's worth, you can just put it right back to them. On the other hand, if you owe less than it's worth, the dealer is contractually obligated to sell it to you for that residual price. Now, trust me, dealers aren't stupid. The dealerships aren't stupid. They have tons of actuaries, tons of mathematicians that you're competing with when it comes to the value, the residual value they're going to give you when you first sign the lease. So it's not like they're just, oh, we didn't know. I mean, they know exactly what's going on. But at the end of the day, you still have a basis to do it. At least you can look at it and say, should we buy this vehicle outright because the value is worth more than what we owe? Or should we turn it back into the dealership because the value is worth less than what we owe? That's just simply called arbitrage. And that gives you're in control of that, which is pretty cool. On top of that, you did pay a lower monthly payment, significantly lower than if you bought the car outright. And again, on a brand new Honda Odyssey, we're looking at $600, $700 a month. I couldn't afford that. On a used, newer vehicle, again, 3 to 4 years old, with lower mileage, say 30,000 miles, because it's used and the bank won't give you extended terms. Again, they're only going to give you 3 years to 3.5, maybe 4. We're looking at $600 a month, and I couldn't afford that either. So the option was lease it at $250 on a brand new vehicle for my wife and kids to drive around, or just keep what we had and pray that it didn't go bad. And so we leased it. And it worked out great. In fact, it's worked out so great that we've leased ever since. And we've had let's see, this is our 3rd lease now. 4th, then we've had 4 leases. And one of the interesting things I've learned on a lease, though, guys, and I want to share this with you. I had no clue this was the case, but my daughter was driving a car that we leased, this is back about 1.5 years ago, because what happened was my company shut my suburban office down, which only took 10 minutes to get to work, and they moved us downtown in Buckhead, just right north of Midtown Atlanta. And if you're familiar with Atlanta, you just want to kill yourself. The traffic's so bad. So I said, well, if I'm going to drive down there, I don't want to be driving a gas guzzler. I want to go ahead and get a a high MPG vehicle to get me back and forth. So something we could afford. And so we bought this Nissan Rogue, and we leased it. And it was nice. I was getting, 40 miles a gallon and whatnot. Pretty cool. On the first month, or the first maintenance we had to do, the maintenance required, my wife took it in for maintenance up here in the North Fulton County, and I took my other vehicle, that Dodge, the Honda Odyssey that we had, down to work. On the first maintenance time. So when my wife gets back, my daughter needed to go to school, so she tossed her the car keys, and literally on that first time we had to get maintenance, she got sideswiped by some kid. Totaled it. USA came out, totaled the vehicle. They said, "Oh, this vehicle is not drivable anymore." And that's the thing with these newer high MPG vehicles. The reason why they're so high MPG is because they're not using old-fashioned steel. There's a lot of plastic in the parts. I mean, just look at the bumper. In the old days, that was hardcore steel and metal, and now it's essentially plastic. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with it, but if you get in a crash, it's more likely to be totaled than the old days. The irony of it is this other kid who hit her had this old school Jeep. That sucker was built for World War II, and that only had a scratch. Even though he hit her, our car was totaled. And thank the good Lord, my daughter was not injured in that. She did sustain some neck injuries, but hopefully she's good. We'll never know. Right now, there's nothing permanent that we can see. But anyway, long story short. So USA totaled it. They're going to give us $18,000 for it. Well, here's the problem. We owed $21,000 on it. So I was like, you got to be kidding me. I've only had this car for a couple months, and it's been hit by some other clown and is totaled. I got to pay $3,000 to get out from underneath this vehicle on top of the down payment I put of $3,000 just a few months previously. So for the privilege of driving this vehicle for a month or two, I'm out $6,000. The $3,000 I put down at signing plus the $3,000 I was upside down. And that's where the lease can get you. Just going back to the Honda Odyssey. Remember that? The Honda Odyssey, the residual value was $15,000, but I could have sold it for $18,000. So I had lots of equity in there simply because the Hondas keep their value well. The Nissan Rogue, well, you lose significant amount of money when you drive it off the lot. So it is only worth $18,000. According to USA, and I trust them, and yet I owed $21,000, so I was upside down by $3,000 on top of the $3,000 I put down as well. The interesting thing though, so I called Nissan. I was like, "Hey, what do I got to do to get out from under this vehicle? Because USA is only going to give you a check for $18,000, but I owe $21,000." Well, apparently with a leased vehicle, and I don't know if this is across the board, but with Nissan it is, and presumably is for all these other guys too. They have what's called gap insurance. Well, they'll make up the difference. So USA paid me a check for $18,000, I owed $21,000, and Nissan is going to make do of the other $3,000. So I wasn't out a dime for that gap insurance or that vehicle at all. Again, other than my $3,000 down payment, I'm not getting that back. But USA 18, I owe 21, the $3,000 there, Nissan kicks in, and that's one of the things that goes with a lease. I did not know that. The interesting thing is way, way, way back in time, I used to be a banker, and I did all kinds of auto loans, and we used to always sell gap insurance like $50, $100 or something like that. And the premise was this exact same thing. If you get your car totaled, and you're paid from your insurance company less than what you owe, the gap insurance will kick in and make up the difference. And I'm telling you, it was a nice thing, but I never had it happen to me personally. So I was always like, yeah, you should get it, but it was never that big of a deal. Well, now it is. It is. You should get gap insurance, and if you have a lease, it comes automatically. Now, the second part of that, the other thing I've learned here, and remember, I've bought a million different cars. I've been driving for 30 years now. So, and again, I'm 47 years old now, and I did not know any of this. Lease, make sure it comes with a gap insurance. That way, if it gets totaled, you won't be up. Have to pay the difference. Secondly, though, what I've learned is whatever you can do, be it a lease or a finance where you own the vehicle outright, do whatever you can not to have a down payment. Because like I said, I did not get that down payment back. I was stuck. I was out that $3,000 down. So let's just say I did not have a down payment instead. Well, my monthly payment might have been an extra $10 a month or whatever. I don't know, maybe $15 a month. but I would have had that $3,000 down payment still in my pocket. So it would have cost me $50 maybe in total higher monthly payments for the 2 to 3 months that I had that vehicle, but I would have kept the $3,000. So whatever you do, negotiate no down payment, folks. And it's not just a lease. Remember, if you got a used vehicle or even a new vehicle, the same thing applies. If you get totaled and the vehicle, the insurance company gives you less than what you owe, you're going to lose out potentially on that amount, but you're going to certainly lose out on the money that you put down. So negotiate whatever you can for no down payment. Guys, there's tons of dealerships out there. Tons of used car dealerships, tons of guys selling new cars, and ladies too. Whatever you do, if someone says you need $3,000 down or we can't do business, just tell them, okay, I'll go down the street. I'd rather pay $15 a month more than pay $3,000 down. And because of the example I shared with you right there. All right, so lastly, is a lease for everybody? No. And why is a lease not for everybody? So I'm going to show you something that's pretty interesting here. There are times when it makes sense to buy a vehicle outright. And I'll use my example for my own circumstance for an example. So I'm driving back and forth to Buckhead from North Fulton County. And my goal was to get a low or high MPG vehicle so I didn't break the bank on just gas cost. And I liked the lease, so it made sense. But in hindsight, I thought I could have done something differently. So I looked online. This is autotrader.com, and I just looked at some. I want to see some vehicles, used vehicles that were for sale with lower mileage that had pretty good MPGs, diesels, but even not diesels. Generally speaking, they're reliable vehicles with pretty decent MPGs that I could have financed as opposed to leasing. And because I'm not trucking around 4 kids and because I just needed a vehicle to get back and forth to work, in hindsight, I might have done this differently. And so here's a 2016 VW Jetta with about 39,000 miles on it for $11,000. Well, just for simplicity, you take your trusty old calculator and you do $11,000 divided by 36 months, you're paying about $300 a month. That doesn't cost any interest. So let's just say it costs you, say you're, $300 a month for a vehicle, maybe a little bit more with interest, maybe a little bit less with negotiating, but just say it's $300 a month. So my lease was $250, but I didn't own anything after 3 years, or I could buy this vehicle for just $300 a month, do what I was intending to do, which is save on miles per gallon expense because a higher MPG vehicle. And after 3 years, I own this puppy. And the nice thing with a Volkswagen is those guys are German. You can't argue with a Volkswagen the way it's manufactured. You can't. I do caution you on a diesel. The only drawback about a diesel does get high mileage for sure. Forget the stupid controversy. Diesels do get high mileage. Big fan of diesels. You don't need to get the oil change as much, and that's because the way diesel gas runs relative to regular gasoline. I'm not going to talk about that here, but just you don't need to get it change as much. But at the end of the day, the drawback with the diesel is there's just not that many diesel mechanics out there who can work on your vehicle. There's just not that many. So unless you know how to do it yourself, you're going to be at the you're going to have fewer and far between mechanics who can actually get your vehicle updated when it needs to be looked at for sure. So that's a problem, of course, because there are fewer. Because the supply is low and the demand is high, the price on your service costs on a diesel vehicle will be higher than it would be just for a good old-fashioned regular gasoline vehicle. So just keep that in the back of your mind. I don't think this is probably a diesel here simply because the controversy the VWs have gone through. They took diesels off the market. They're going to bring them back, and we'll see if there's any demand for them. But anyway, it's still got its good gas mileage, $11,000. After 3 years, you own that puppy outright. If you were able to finance that guy for 42 months, it would be $262 a month. So again, $250 to $300, which is kind of what we were looking at in terms of affordability for our own vehicle. In hindsight, again, I wish I kind of would have done this route simply because after 3 years, I do own it outright. The point, what I'm trying to get the vehicle to serve for is just to take old Josh back and forth to work. I don't have the concern of 4 kids needing to fit in a little 4-door or 2-door, I guess a 4-door sedan. And so buying a vehicle for 3 years to 4, 3.5 to even 4 years if the bank will go that route probably made sense. So remember what the point is of what you're trying to accomplish. Are you trying to get something where you're hauling a bunch of kids around? You need something that's going to be safe. You're not going to have any issues with reliability right on the front end. Or is it just you just going back and forth to work? Other than you in the vehicle, if the vehicle gets totaled, it's not, and we don't want anything to happen to you. But maybe high miles per gallon, but you don't need to fit a crew of 5 or 6 people in your car. Just you getting back and forth to work. Good old. And I'm not recommending a VW. I'm just saying they're great, wonderful vehicles. I would recommend it, but just using this for an example, you might be able to get by. In fact, I bet you can get by better than if you leased a vehicle, simply because after 3 years you own this guy. And then the money you're spending on it, well, guess what? You can use that to further pay other debt off, because remember, as I said at the beginning of this tutorial, debt is the enemy. We do not want you carrying debt into retirement. We do not. So whatever you can do, minimize your outgoing cash flow and minimize your debt, because the debt will hurt you in retirement big time for sure. Okay. So that's this issue here. I hope this makes sense to you. Put your comments below. Did you have any experience with leasing? Pay off for you? Actually, I'm even more curious. When the lease expired, what did you do with it? Did you turn around and sell it for that arbitrage I talked about, where you have more value in the vehicle than what you owed to the dealership? I'm just curious to see how that went for you. On the other hand, when you gave it back, were you stunned about how much they costed you because you didn't use their maintenance services, or you had this little ding or something like that? Yeah, I'd like to hear that too. It's pretty interesting, because again, leasing for me is something I've only done over the last 10 years or so, and I do think a lot of people overlook it, and they should not. Don't forget to subscribe down below there. Please hit subscribe. Give me a thumbs up. Thumbs up help me. It helps YouTube see this channel and get it out to other people as well who might be ignorant of it. So a thumbs up are good. And hit the notification button as well on a little bell so you'll be notified of further content. Hey, I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Heritage Wealth Planning YouTube channel. Thanks, guys.